Welcome back to Leveraging Leadership, where we unpack the art of business leadership. I'm your host, Emily Sander, Chief of Staff turned Executive Leadership Coach. This show is all about finding your points of greatest influence and leveraging them to better serve those around you. Our guest today is Conor Cunneen, and he is a former VP of Marketing turned keynote speaker and business humorist. Conor, welcome to the show.
Hey, delighted to be here, Emily. Thanks for inviting me on.
Beautiful. So what had you realize the power of humor or the effectiveness of humor in the business world?
Well, I think the basic premise that I've got, Emily, is that we like to do business with people that we like. And people do business with people that they know, like, and trust. And
Yes.
one of the simple ways to get people to appreciate you a little bit more, like you a little bit more, is if you can put a smile on their face and make them feel better. And no, I'm not talking about comedy or anything like that, but if when you've left the room, someone says, hey, I like that person, they got good concepts, but they put a smile on my face or they made me feel better. And if you get that kind of reaction, and then if the next time you try to make an appointment with that person, their reaction is, oh yeah, I'd like to chat with you again. That's what I'm talking about. Just humor is a vehicle to help you to connect better with people. And as I say, I am not talking comedy. I'm just talking about putting a smile on people's face, make them chuckle once or twice in a sales pitch or in a business presentation. And it will help you to connect better and get your message across better.
Okay, so we're not saying you need to be a stand-up comedian to do this. We're just saying, add some lighthearted moments or stories perhaps in a presentation. So given that, can you talk us through, what makes a good presentation? Have you seen a example where, a joke or a little story has turned that presentation around, has turned the tone around and gotten it to a different outcome?
Yeah, I mean, it's what I try to do all of the time, but I'll give you a couple of specific examples. When I do a program on adding humor to your presentation, I talk about a concept. Well, I'll ask you the question and we see if we can get the right answer. I'm looking for a one-word answer, Emily. And the question is, if I say something funny, what is it that I expect that you will do?
Laugh?
Very
Smile?
good. Yay. All right. That was not pre-prompted, listeners and viewers. LAUGH. LAUGH is a 5-letter acronym, and it provides 5 concepts that will help people to add humor to their presentation. And the first element of that LAUGH concept is listen to the humor that is around you. Listen to the humor that you might have said that made someone else laugh. Record it, capture it, and it will help to make a difference sometime, somewhere in one of your presentations. An example of this that I thought was really interesting was I speak a fair amount to healthcare groups, oncology groups. I've had 2 bouts of cancer over the years, so that the silver lining was that it opened doors to healthcare and continuing ed courses for healthcare professionals, etc. And God love healthcare professionals who have to go to continuing ed programs. Mother of divine, they are just incredibly boring most of the time. I remember I was at one, I think it was somewhere down in Arkansas, the mid part of the country anyway. And the nurses who were well used to these continuing ed sessions, they came in, they were at the back of the room with their knitting. Okay. But one of the speakers was a neurosurgeon, some kind of a brain surgeon. I have no recollection what his topic was, but this guy was so boring now. We just prayed for a lobotomy, I swear. But there was another doctor who came on, though, who I think had been at some Toastmasters meetings, and he said, I was told that if I want to connect with my audience, I should add a little bit of humor and show a humorous slide. So this doctor puts up a humorous slide, i.e. a slide of the humorous bone.
Oh boy.
And the audience just kind of really smiled and chuckled at it. And he had them from then on kind of thing. So it was just a stupid little slide in one sense. but it was very relevant to what he was trying to do. It was relevant to the profession, and it was a play on words. And he obviously just got the idea that, hey, if I can connect with them early, I'm going to be able to hold them better. So that was just one simple little example that I saw other people do. And what I encourage people to do is to find some simple little examples that puts a smile on your face. And if it puts a smile on your face, quite likely it'll put a smile on your audience's face, or on your customer's face, or on the client that you're dealing with. Not that you want to have them cracked up laughing like Kevin Hart or Seinfeld or anything like that, but it's a little reinforcement of your key message via humor.
And I love what you said there, because I've heard that if you're giving a presentation, add a joke or something lighthearted in the first third, because it'll signal to the audience, hey, we're going to have some fun. And then if you get them to smile or laugh, I forget what it's called, but there's like this endorphin or pheromone thing that
Yeah,
happens where you're connected in a different way.
yeah,
And then I love the example because it wasn't, oh, I'm trying to sing and dance and get you to laugh up here like a stand-up comedian. It's literally a slide that you get kind of the, okay, like the humorous bone. I get it. It's not a, like laugh out
yeah,
loud, but
yeah,
it is still a smile. And that's all you need. That's all you need to get them to just, okay, that's a corny joke or it's a dad joke or whatever, but it does its job. So if someone is listening to this and they're like, look, I'm not funny, and I know that you've said you don't have to be funny to be funny. If someone's just naturally not inclined that way, what are some good ways they can do that without, going outside of their character or making it feel forced?
yeah. All right. I was on a previous podcast, and she repeated the line, "You don't have to be funny to be funny," which she said, in fact, that's a funny line, kind of thing. But what I'm basically saying is that with this LAUGH acronym, what you do is you capture the humor all around you. Uh, Researchers will suggest that the adult laughs about 15 times a day, or smiles 15 times a day. Now, I would suggest that you probably did that, although you're above average, so you would have laughed 25 times yesterday, Emily, okay? But I would suggest you probably don't remember almost any of those times that you smiled or laughed. What I'm saying is that just capture that humor. So the first element of the LAUGH acronym is listen to what made you laugh, write it down, capture it. Listen to what you said that put a smile on someone else's face, write it down and capture it. You don't have to know when you're going to use it, but what you're doing is you're building up a bank of humorous material that sometime, somewhere, you'll be able to take it. And the basic idea here is that, you're right, you don't think you're funny, but almost certainly you put a smile on someone's face in the last few days. Just pay attention to those. So that's the first element of the LAUGH acronym that will help you to add relevant humor to reinforce your message. Second element of the LAUGH acronym is A, and it's about, well, I'll ask you a question, Emily, again. So let's assume that over the last couple of days, you've laughed 15 times a day by 7 days in the week, roughly 100 times in the week. What do you think you laughed most at? Was it the jokes that you laughed at, or was it stories or comments or quips that you got from other people?
The latter.
The latter, yeah. I mean, we think you got to bring jokes to your presentation, but what makes people laugh is stories. And
Mm.
what I say to my audience is that if you can bring in a story or an anecdote to your presentation, what? It's not antidote. It's anecdote. Oh, sorry. Okay, it's anecdote. Right. Okay. But what I do say here is seriously is that the antidote to a weak presentation is often a good anecdote. Okay.
Ah,
So what I'm doing there is I'm just a little bit play with words between antidote and anecdote. Sometimes can be funny. But what I'm saying is that the things that made you laugh around the water cooler, that made your friends laugh at a party or down in Starbucks or something like that, was probably an anecdote. And if we take the third element of the LAUGH acronym, so we can listen to the anecdote that is the funniest one is where something was uncomfortable, uncomfortable at some stage. We don't laugh at stories where everything went perfectly. We laugh at stories where something went wrong. and now you can tell that story. And basically, what I suggest to people is that the story that you told that has your friends laughing uproariously at the coffee morning or whatever it is, or down at the bar or the pub, that's a story that probably has got some legs that you can use to illustrate a point that you're making in your sales presentation, in your business presentation, or in your keynote speech. You might have to adapt it a little bit, change the surroundings, but you've got the nugget there that you likely can use that will help you to add relevant humor to your presentation.
Okay, so we've got listen, anecdote, uncomfortable.
Okay. The
We
next
got
one is G, and G is, as I say, is for the Googler. Okay. Right. Okay. Now here's the thing. I'm talking about Google here, and I actually talk about Googling on the Bing. Good Lord. Okay. All right. Now, two things about that. Well, I'll explain. So the basic idea is that you Google on the Bing for some humorous material. But before I go into how you do that, I at some presentation was talking about using Google. I refer to it as the Googler, and the audience laughed. I'm thinking, huh, is that funny? It is. They laugh. So no, I don't talk about using Google. I talk about the Googler. Okay, I listened and I laughed. A few months back, I was back in Ireland, saw Springsteen in Cork. Yay!
Oh, wow.
I was with my brother-in-law, and I just made some reference at some stage about Googling on the Bing. And he kind of laughed and he said, "Hey, that's funny." I said, Finbar is my brother-in-law. I said, Finbar, I heard you use that phrase about 7 years ago, and I've remembered
Oh.
it, and I use it regularly now. Finbar had no recollection of it. I was able to play it back to him. He laughed at it. But what I do now say when I'm talking about the G in the LAUGH acronym, I talk about the Googler, and I talk about silly, stupidly kind of Googling on the Bing or Google on the AI. But again, it's just material, little chuckles that I didn't create, but that I captured. And they're examples of, if you get into that kind of a habit of capturing the humor, you don't have to be funny to be funny. Just capture the humor around you. So,
Okay.
yeah, in terms of Googling on the Bing, then what I basically say, so if you're talking about leadership, Emily, Google for things like funny quotes about leadership. What did Mark Twain say about teamwork or leadership or management? What did Groucho Marx, that famous philosopher, Groucho Marx, say about XYZ? So you make your point, your serious point, and then you could say, maybe pop up a slide, a quote from, and as this famous philosopher, Groucho Marx, said. But it's a slide that is humorous, but has some reinforcing element to what you have
Okay.
been saying. Okay?
Okay. So that's the Googler. And then bring us home with the H.
Bring us home with the H. H is for Hee 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 to ho ho ho. And this goes back in a sense to the first element that we spoke about of the LAUGH acronym, listen. So quite likely when you're doing some of your workshops or material or consulting, Emily, you're going to make a comment, a quip, an ad lib that'll put a smile on people's face. Listen to that and say, all right, I got a hee 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 from that. What can I do with that phrase or that comment or that statement that'll take it from a hee 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 to a ho ho ho? And there's simple little things that you can do to make that happen. The example I quoted earlier was, I speak a lot to organizations to improve people, performance, and productivity with a smile. And I try to give relatable examples. And sometimes I might reference a story where uh, you're talking to your teenager and you ask your teenager to do something, and you come home 6 hours later and the teenager ain't done it. And there's a blank look in the teenager's face, and you know where the brain should be, there's an empty space. And it's populated by two agitated chipmunks saying, "What were we supposed to do? What were we supposed to do?" So I'll pause there. My audience, a lot of the audience can absolutely relate to that. Okay. When I was telling that story initially, there was the moral to the whole story. We don't need to go into it right now. When I was telling that story initially, I just said, you come home, the teenager has that look in his face that says there's an empty space in the brain. And then another time I dropped in, an empty space that's populated by two chipmunks running around the place. That got a little bit of
Yeah,
additional laughter. The one that really helps at the pop is putting the word agitated in front of chipmunks. Because agitated chipmunks is apparently funnier than chipmunks. But it's just one little
it
example
is.
where, yeah, yeah. So it's one little example. Sometimes use hamsters as well. Hamsters are deemed to be make people laugh. Um, but it's an example of where just one word helps the whole thing to go from hee 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 to ho ho ho. So the LAUGH acronym is something that anyone can do. Listen, anecdote, uncomfortable, Googler, hee 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 to ho ho ho, that anyone can do. Even if you're not funny, you can take that material and drop it in sometime, someplace, once or twice in your presentation, and you will connect better with your audience. People like to do business with people they like, and that will help you in that mission, I believe.
Okay, so I'm hearing all that, and a takeaway for a listener would be start building that bank of little things that make people chuckle that you
Yeah,
just come across in daily life. And then when you have a presentation or you're at a team meeting or what have you, just pick one that's relevant and just add it in, or maybe pick two that are relevant and add them in, and see how they do, and then get some feedback and refine from there. Is that the general process?
that's basically it. And everyone has got their iPhone or their Android, so on Apple Notes. I pop something in nearly every day, I would say, that is somewhere relevant. Half of the time when I go back and look at it, I've got better now at this. But some of the earlier stuff I was doing, I was saying, what did I write that down for? I've no recollection what I wrote that down for. So I know trying to put the context into the little note that I write down as well. But that's basically what you should be doing if you want to add humor to your presentation.
And then one more last question on the presentation piece is, so I'm thinking, you know what the presentation is about, you know what your segment is trying to convey, and then to go, okay, what out of my bank can help supplement or help reinforce or just talk about that in a different way or a funny angle? Do you just kind of, what am I trying to say here? Oh yeah, I have these three. Let me try
Yeah.
this one. Is that the process?
That basically is the process. And the other places where you get the banks of information, uh, people still use email, but I mean, you don't get, I don't get emails or jokes or funny stories emails to me anymore, but they come on WhatsApp or they come on text, etc. I save those as well. I don't know when or
Okay.
if or ever I will use them, but particularly with some of the little anecdotes you get about around leadership or with the workplace, etc. Some of those you can just adapt a little bit, and maybe the joke. I try to keep away from jokes, but maybe the anecdote needs a little bit of massaging. Maybe when someone is talking about something goes wrong in a company, what you do is, let's say you're making your company presentation in-house, you actually, when you talk about the company where something went wrong, you talk about your competitor, for instance. Just drop the competitor's name in. So if I'm in Coca-Cola making a presentation of Coca-Cola, I might rip Pepsi, for instance. Okay,
Yeah.
just a little bit of customization can also help to make it pop a little bit more.
Okay. And so let's move to team culture and just interactions. So we've done the presentations, which I think a lot of people listening to this have to make presentations, or
Yeah.
they're at least standing up at team meetings and doing certain segments. So I think what we've said, or what you've said, will be very, very helpful with the LAUGH acronym. But for just everyday interactions, how do we build a lighthearted, humorous environment? Because we know that it goes to employee retention and retaining top talent, and we know it goes to attracting people to come into an organization. So how do we build that in the day-to-day interactions with people?
Right. No, this one is significantly more challenging because so much of the culture and the atmosphere in an organization is set by the leader of that the organization or of that department or of that team. So you've got to make sure that I think that the team leader appreciates that if we can add a little bit of humor in our workplace, we're going to have more production, more productivity, and a better atmosphere. And this I fully accept is more of a challenge than just talking about adding humor to your presentation. But what I do suggest, a simple little one in some of the workshops that I've done, is that if you are and this is regular now, of course, we've got our weekly sales meeting, or we've got our weekly supply chain meeting, and we go through the same agenda time after time after time. And almost always we're talking about problems and challenges and things that went wrong
Mm.
and blaming the other department, etc. As I said, I was in marketing. So when we used to things like sales forecasting, etc., our forecasting was always perfect. It was the supply chain was the problem. Okay. But everyone blames every other department kind of thing, or blames people within that department. What I suggest is that if you're doing a weekly meeting, one of the first things that should go on the agenda, I'll give you two things that should go on the agenda. The first thing that should go on the agenda is a bad joke, right? The idea is that it's kind of just creating a little bit of levity in the situation. And what I encourage people to do now, I've done this for a number of organizations, and I know a few of them have done this, and I'm getting good feedback from it. Others haven't bought into it. But I do believe that if you're doing weekly meetings with the same people sitting in the same seats with their butts implanted on those chairs that they've been on for the last 14 years or whatever it is, one of the ways to just change the vibe is to ask each team member on a iterative basis, I want you to tell me a really bad joke to start the meeting next week. So you get onto the Googler and you tell something. The joke that will get the best reaction is, oh my God, that's so terrible. Not offensive, obviously, but it gets groans. I do believe you should start meetings with that, regular meetings. The other question that I believe you should start a meeting with, and this is not the humorous side of it, is the question is, what did we do well in the past week?
Mm.
What did we do well in the past week? So what we're starting off with is positives, because most of the meeting is going to be about negatives, challenges, where
Right.
we're running behind schedule, etc. But if I can start a meeting with asking the question, what did we do well? And Emily, you told me that's something that you had achieved in the last week. I'm giving you kudos. I'm giving you compliments. You're feeling better. It's changing the vibe in the room. Someone else then, once they realize, hey, she's getting complimented for saying something positive about what she did or our team did, then all the people are going to pop in as well. It's a really powerful question for weekly meetings, monthly meetings, or if you're in the food service area or manufacturing where we've got a daily huddle and get together where no one listens to what they're being told because we've heard it again and again and again. However, if you ask the question, what did we do well yesterday?
Mm.
Someone's going to say, oh, food service, we looked after table 14 when Marie ran into some trouble, kind of thing. Kudos to you. It's a powerful question that can really make a difference to organizations, and it's going to create good teamwork and good vibe because people are being appreciated.
I think that's a really good one because we often get inundated with the negative, right? So it's like, we're here to talk about the issues, let's resolve the issues and work together for fix these problems. And there are issues, of course, that need to
Yeah,
be addressed and resolved, but there's also plenty of good things that happen that just don't get airtime. And
yeah,
so to give a balanced, kind of fair approach about how things are going, you have to add that. But I think we're so used to gravitating toward the negative, you have to intentionally put the positive in there. So I
yeah,
love your idea of starting with that and then with the bad joke
yeah,
and the positive kudos. I think that just kind of lightens the room and sets the tone for, okay, let's have an open conversation here. So love that suggestion. If someone's listening and is really funny and is like, look, I don't have a problem with not being funny enough, I have a problem almost the other way. How do I balance being really funny and out there and also being professional? And if I'm in a high stakes meeting or I'm giving a presentation to senior executives or the board, how do you kind of mix and match being funny and professional at the same time?
Well, I think your first job is to be professional. And part of the way of being professional is you've got good content, you've your research done, you're well prepped, and you appreciate that. One of the ways I can get my message across well is by just using humor once or twice to reinforce a key comment that I was making. The danger is
Mm.
that if you try to be too funny, all right, they're going to laugh, but they're not going to take you seriously. The solid message you're trying to get across gets lost in their perception of you. So,
Yeah.
uh, point one, be professional, be prepared, but being professional and being prepared allows you at times to add a little bit of humor to the presentation, and that's when you will then get the results that you want, I would suggest.
And you've been in front of a number of crowds in different groups of sizes and backgrounds, et cetera. I'm assuming that part of it is reading the room, where it's like, oh my gosh, if this is a lively group and okay, they're going after everything I'm throwing out at them, then that might be one instance. If it's like, look, I'm up against a stone wall here, so I have to adjust my approach. Or it might be, they're not smiling right now, but I can kind of sense that they want to laugh and they
Yeah.
want to smile, so I might keep going. How do you read the room in that sense?
Well, I think see, a lot depends on what the audience is. My favorite audience to speak to is nurses, particularly in the oncology area. I've had two bouts of cancer over the years, and I just love speaking to nurses who are in a high stress environment, and they've got a wonderful sense of humor. So what I try to do there is my core keynote for a lot of organizations around the gift of GAB, which is goals, attitude, and behavior. And I talk to nurses about creating a great healthcare environment or patient environment through the gift of gap, goals, attitude, behavior. I know in that presentation where they're at a conference to learn, but to be motivated as well, or being brought in to motivate them for the day, I can throw a lot of humorous quips and anecdotes into that. So the balance of good content is really there, but it's reinforced by a lot of humor. Now, I go into, let's say, an engineering association conference on a Monday morning, where quite likely some of them have been on the tear or drinking until 4 o'clock in the morning on the first day of a
They're
conference
recovering.
kind of thing. Yeah. I mean, the worst day to do a sales conference opening keynote is the first day, because they've all been on the trash, as we would say in Ireland, the previous night. So the engineers are kind of going there, and they're playing to the stereotype of the engineer.
Yeah.
But the fact is that when they're in the bar or when they're out with their friends, they're just the same as you and me, but there's kind of a little stereotype. So what I do with these organizations is that I work initially on maybe just a very small little bit of levity, but then really solid content initially. And then as we're going on, they realize, hey, this guy's making some kind of sense. Then you bring in a little bit of humor, more good sense, and then more humor, etc. So I can start with a lot of the humor when I'm speaking to the nurses who are there to be motivated and have a fun time. When I'm speaking to the serious business group, I'll start with content and then start using the humor as the axle grease to help the presentation move along.
Timing is everything and sequencing is everything. One question I have is, you've talked about building that bank of anecdotes. Would you suggest practicing some of those? Like, okay, I have that one, but like, here's how I would say it in this scenario. Or would you, how do I ask this? Would you suggest knowing the framework of an anecdote or the framework of how to put something together, and then you just slot things into that, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think the more you can practice and get, I mean, Teddy Roosevelt says that credit goes to the person who goes into the arena, etc. And
Yeah.
you've got to get into the arena to see how it actually does work. If you take stand-up comics, for instance, even the guys like Kevin Hart, Seinfeld, etc., they'll go to nightclubs at 2 o'clock in the morning in New York, and they'll do a 15-minute piece and see how it goes. And then they'll probably go back another week, the following week, and they'll do the same 15-minute piece, except 2 minutes of that have been changed a little bit or adapted. And the more experience you get almost in everything, the better you're going to get at it. What I do encourage people to do is to go back to the LAUGH acronym, to listen to the reaction that you got and ask yourself, or which is the first element of the LAUGH acronym, the H is the Hee Hee Hee. Is there some way that I can adapt it or improve it to make it funnier? One of the ways to improve it is to try and customize the presentation. I'll give an example of this. What I normally do is, if I'm doing an event, let's say in San Diego or in Seattle, I'll get onto the Googler and I'll Google San Diego stroke Irish history or Seattle Irish history and see whether or not there's anything relevant about Ireland or Irish settlers over there. I might be able to adapt something. But I was doing something up in this was a pre-COVID. I was doing something in Hartford, Connecticut, good Patriots country, New England Patriots country. So I'll tell a story about being stopped by a cop. This is one of my signature stories. It's about choosing your attitude. Okay, so I'm telling the story about the cop. I see what I refer to as a mobile discotheque behind me. Okay, half car, flashing lights. I see the cop get out of his car and walk up towards me. And I said to the audience in Hartford, Connecticut, I said, this cop was really ugly. He reminded me of Tom Brady.
Oh,
Okay.
no. Hey, now.
So I get booed by the audience good naturedly, kind of thing. But I could use that line in Connecticut and New England area because it was
Yeah.
customizing to their audience. But it was just a simple little thing. And that's what I tried to do is there's some little way I can take a famous character from the city or a famous politician or sports person and have a little bit of fun with them when I'm talking to them.
Yes. And so just curious, you're obviously Irish. Are certain styles of Irish humor, do they play well in America and certain parts that don't? Or how do you use that?
Yeah, well, the Irish are very good, and the English Brits are like this as well. There's a lot of kind of um, banter, deprecating banter that we can get away with in Ireland or with family that you wouldn't do here. So I got to be careful on that. One of the things I do quite regularly is when I'm starting my presentations to an audience where, so I was in Seattle about 2 weeks ago speaking to a cancer survivorship group, and I said, we're here, and I promise you we'll have some great crack. And there's silence kind of in the room. And I said, oh, explain crack to them. Oh, okay, all right, okay. So I said, let me explain here. In Ireland, the word for fun is crack.
Ah,
All right.
okay.
So if you're meeting, I quite honestly, when I was in Ireland a few weeks ago, I mean, I kept track of it. Like quite a number of people says, "Hey Conor, how's the crack?" or "Where's the crack?" Okay. And as I said to my audiences in Ireland, you're quite likely to hear Sister Mary say, "Oh, Sister Mary, you wouldn't believe the amount of crack we had down at the parish priest's house last night." Okay. But that's an example of taking an Irish word, it has a different context, and using it. And that's where kind of some ethnic humor can come in. But the ethnic humor has to be related to your own ethnicity. I can't tell Jewish jokes. I won't tell Italian jokes or make fun of them. I can have a bit of fun about my Irish heritage, all right. But each of the time I do it, I try to make sure that it reinforces or relates to a comment that I've previously made.
Love it. Well, you've kind of given us a really good sample set of what one of your keynotes or workshops will be like. But can you talk about the keynote signature talks that you do, or perhaps the workshops and the different organizations that you go to?
Yeah, okay. Well, what I basically do is I say my mission is to improve people, performance, and productivity with a smile. My promise is that I will leave the audience, no matter who they are, with a smile in the face, with a spring in the step, and actionable takeaways based on the reason why I was brought in. So, smile in the face, a spring in the step, and the actionable takeaways, which is critical. So, basically, my core message, I do quite a few different keynotes, but my core keynote is based around, Emily, the gift of gab, which is goals, attitude, behavior. Goals, attitude, behavior. And what I say to organizations is that if you can bring this concept of macro and micro goals into your organization, I'll explain that in a second. Choosing your attitude when things are difficult, and yet that your behavior creates your brand. Those are the areas I try to speak to. So when I'm speaking to organizations about goals, attitudes, and behavior, I talk about the importance of having a macro goal. And the question I put to the audience, Emily, is the question is, what do you want to be famous for? That's it. What do you want to be famous for? What is it you want your team members to say about you when you're not in the room? What is it you
Yeah.
want your leadership to say about you when they're considering you for a promotion or a transfer to a different department, etc.? And if you know what you want them to say about you, you've some chance of actually working on a procedure, on a program to make sure you get to that kind of a result. It's the same when I'm talking to people who are I speak a lot to people in job search. It's not an income stream. It's just a real passion of mine. I say to job seekers, before you go into the interview, know what you want the recruiter to say about you
Yes.
after you have left the room, because they're going to be selling you up to the next level. You need to be clear on what it is you want them to say about you. So that's the macro goal. We spend a little bit of time talking about that. And then I say, I can give you 5 micro goals that will help you to achieve your macro goal. And I don't need to know what your macro goal is, but I can provide you with 5 micro goals that will help you to achieve your goal.
All right, love it. And I love your behavior is your brand. That's so, so true. So, Conor, you've laid out a whole bunch for people, and if folks are listening and they're like, "Oh my gosh, we want Conor to come in for our, first of the year kickoff or our brainstorming or whatever type of meeting, on-site, off-site, whatever it is," where can people reach out to contact you?
Best way is to just to hit my website, irishmanspeaks.com. Irishman Speaks is the brand. Surprise, surprise. We just stumbled on as well. I mean, I do talk about branding and having a clear brand, etc. I wasn't Irishman Speaks initially, but it kind of developed over a period of time. So I'm on Irishman Speaks, all one word. It's also on LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, which I'm finding actually quite helpful. Getting good response on TikTok. Instagram as well, all one word, Irishman Speaks. Conor is spelled with one N, Emily. My parents could not afford 2 N's back in Ireland, so we went with 1 N. Okay, Conor Cunneen, but Irishman Speaks. I love to talk to someone about how I can leave their people with a smile in the face, a spring in the step, and actionable takeaways to achieve your goals.
Beautiful. And we'll have all of that information in the show notes. But Conor, thank you once again. Appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure, Emily. Thanks a lot. Stay well. Best with your business.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.